Welcome, everyone, to the Sorensen Center's first Justice Through Art program of 2021. I'm Camille Massey, and I'm founding executive director of the Sorensen Center. And I am delighted that we have so much talent in the room. This is going to be an incredible program. We have an opportunity to have a sneak preview of Wild. I want to thank the student groups, the formerly incarcerated Law Students Association and the Black Lawyers Student Association, who are co-sponsoring this event. I'm just looking, we have leadership from those groups here. They'll be participating in the conversation. We also, you should know if you're new to CUNY Law events that we have a deep bench of talent at the CUNY Law of the Service of Human Needs is our motto. And we have a number of colleagues who are working and addressing criminal justice reform and juvenile justice. And so it was perfect that this came together with our good friend and visionary choreographer and educator, Jeremy McQueen. Welcome, Jeremy. He's also here with his principal dancer, Elijah Lancaster. We're delighted to have him, his first year in Alvin Ailey 2. And we'll bring him into the conversation later, as well as bringing in our professor, Fareed Hayat, and Pablo Rojo, who are going to join our conversation and talk about juvenile justice with us and the power of art, the power of dance, and the power of law, and how much there is to do, but how with our imagination and our talent, we can do that together. So welcome, Jeremy.
Thank you for having me, Camille.
This is so exciting. You have recently been named the Soros, I guess it's social media fellow, and the first choreographer in the history of these Soros Justice Fellows. So congratulations on that.
Thank you so much. Yeah, thank you.
And you're also the founder of the Black Iris Project. And not everyone here knows what that is. So tell us about it.
Absolutely. The Black Iris Project is a conglomerate of artists from all different genres coming together specifically to create original classical and contemporary ballets that are rooted in Black history or the Black experience. Growing up as a kid in San Diego, California, I so frequently was offered opportunities to go and see live dance and theater, but very rarely saw stories that resonated directly with me and my community. And so after moving to New York and pursuing a career as a professional performer for over 15 years, I decided to take a leap of faith and be the change that I wish to see in the world by starting my own collaborative, bringing specifically ballet and modern based dancers together to create these stories annually that we share with various communities all around the country.
And what creations you've made. I mean, when I got to know you, you were working on Madiba that then it had its world premiere. How did that come about?
Yeah, that was 5 years ago, believe it or not. Time has really, really flown by. Madiba was a score written by an incredible classical composer named Carmen Moore. I stumbled upon it. He had premiered it just earlier that year at Carnegie Hall, and I stumbled upon it in a write-up, I think about in the New York Times. And I reached out to him and was like, I'd love to hear this music because it was so rare that I had an opportunity to even be exposed to Black classical composers, let alone a score, an original score written for full orchestra about a Black humanitarian. So it just felt very synergetic to work together. And I listened to the music, I fell in love with it right away, and we eventually brought that story to life. And Misty Copeland was very instrumental in helping us bring that story to life and also bring it to the Kennedy Center where we performed for a week. But that was our first big ballet that we created as an actual collaborative. And it was such a great honor to bring his triumphant story to life.
It was triumphant, and some of us had an opportunity. The Sorensen Center led a delegation to watch it, not at the Kennedy Center, but here in New York at Marcus Garvey Park, out under
Yeah.
the stars when we could all be together. So fast forward, you then had this beautiful production of A Mother's Right, and now Wild. How did you come up with this idea? What were you
Um,
influenced by?
it actually started as a collaboration between myself and an incredible singer-songwriter named Morgan. Nashville Ballet had approached me about working on a new idea for a ballet with them. And it was a project where they would pair a choreographer with a composer, excuse me. And they thought we would be a good fit together. We didn't know each other, but we both came from musical theater backgrounds, having been on Broadway in various shows. But we had never crossed paths. And so we started talking, and he told me, he just asked a question about what stories I would want to tell. And I said, there's this book, Where the Wild Things Are, that I've always loved since I was a child, but I never really had an opportunity yet to do anything with it. So it started out as this project for Nashville Ballet, and then the pandemic hit. And that's also around the same time that I ended up visiting the Equal Justice Initiative museum and memorial in Montgomery, Alabama, where my family's from. And I fell in love with this really haunting portrait by photographer Richard Ross of a young, I think about 12-year-old male that was in a juvenile detention facility. And he's staring at these concrete walls that essentially had etchings all over them. And I was just so caught in a trance by this portrait, and I kept bringing my cousin back to the portrait so that I could look at it and spend more time with it. But I was just so moved by wanting to know more about this young boy's story, and especially about his hopes and his dreams for his future and where he sees himself and his life going. On the walls, there were all of these different affirmations. One in particular said north or nothing. And that was something that really stuck with me, of, the ability to think beyond one's circumstances and imagine and envision someone and their lives being greater than where they are right now. I think that that's a true testament to the human spirit, especially as a Black man myself, coming from San Diego, moving to New York, not knowing if it would be possible for me to have the career that I'm having today, but being able to visualize even in my bedroom as an 8-year-old child and say, I want to be on a Broadway stage, and being able to manifest that in my mind, I think is really instrumental. And that was something that really had me curious about the struggles and the challenges that so many young men and women go through behind bars, where they're constantly being, you know, um, chastised for their creativity, and they're thinking that they're, wonderful, powerful kings and queens. And so I wanted to create a ballet that authentically shines light on so many various issues in our country, but specifically giving young Black and brown men and women of color an opportunity to see their stories come to life in a way that perhaps they've never seen through ballet.
Can we go ahead and see how you've brought that story to life?
Sure. So the first little clip I'm going to share with you is an excerpt from Wild, Act One, which is the second installment in our 4-part film that I'm creating over the course of this next year as part of my Soros Justice Fellowship. This one clip, the music was written by an incredible composer named Morgan, the same one that I was meant to work on this Nashville Ballet work with. And it features Elijah Lancaster as the lead male in the role.
Try to erase it, you can. These walls feel like chambers, and then I'm right in the middle, and I'm so invisible, wanting to cry, but I can't. I'm trapped in the echo, I'm caught. Get me lost, get me lost, get me lost.
That particular, section, I was really inspired by Richard Ross's incredible book called Juvie Talk. And it features interviews that he had done over the course of about 10 years with youth all over the country, really giving them an opportunity to share their story of what they're going through, what they've experienced, and the pictures were just so haunting. And so this particular scene is in collaboration with Richard Ross. All of those pictures that you see on the walls are featuring him, and within that entire piece, you also saw a few dancing moments. We're always about creating a spirit of community amongst Black dancers around the country, and so we invited 12 incredibly talented Black men from all different companies around the country, including Alonzo King Lyons Ballet, Dallas Black Dance Theater, LA Dance Project, to contribute choreographically in their own way. I sent them a jumpsuit, and we had a brief Zoom meeting where I gave them a prompt and we talked about the song and the intention. But the entire piece is really just to surround Elijah's character with love, letting him know that he's not alone in this experience and that there have been so many people that have been impacted by the juvenile justice system, and just finding that spirit of community and that willingness to communicate one's story and to share that and to find value in believing in your story and that it contributes to a much greater goal.
So powerful and beautiful. And I just want us to bring Elijah right into this conversation.
Hi.
Incredible. So beautiful and powerful.
Thank you. I appreciate it. It was my first time seeing it, so I actually gave myself goosebumps. I was like, okay, good job, Elijah. Thank
Tell
you.
us about how this collaboration started between the two of you, but I also don't want to get away from the intention of what we just saw and what was described, and really how that developed between you two during COVID, of all things. So both in terms of the process, but also the way you got to know each other.
Oh, well, that is a very good question. Jeremy and I have known each other for actually quite a few years. We've done two different photo shoots together via Black Iris Project. One was an iconic one where I did a headstand with the fist, the 100 fists for Black History Month. There's also a great photo shoot where we did in a kiddie pool, but it didn't look like a kiddie pool via the shoot. It was very good. It's called The Storm. So I've known Jeremy for a very long time. He reached out to me during the pandemic and he said, I have this idea. And I saw this very young, high energy, spirited boy in just this room by himself. And even though, yes, it was a little like sad, he's like, I was thinking and you fit it perfect. For me, yes, that was like, oh, but then at the same time it was like he thought of me first, so it was very meaningful, and I still to this day appreciate you for having me in this process, because we know that this story is a very big story and it's a very big problem in America. So knowing that I was able to help and put in my own self into that process was very fulfilling. So thank you, Jeremy. But with that being said, the process was very intense. Usually with my work in dance, we get a cute 4 weeks to a month to like prepare for a whole piece. This one we got 2 weeks, which was a little intimidating at first, knowing that I had to learn, I think, 7+ dances, each varying in different lengths. And then on top of that, I did acting for the very first time in my life. So that on top of that, it was very intense to come back into because I hadn't been dancing for about a year during this quarantine. Yeah, it's been very tough on us artists. But Jeremy was very kind in asking me to join the process. It was emotional. It was long, but very short. You know what I mean? Like it felt like a very heavy process, but we had such a short amount of time that we just had to like really get into it and dive deep. So yeah.
Jeremy, jump in here. How did you get into it so quickly? And were you physically at times together and or doing most of this remote?
Yeah, creating work during the middle of the pandemic has been, or navigating how to create work during the middle of the pandemic has been just extraordinary. It's presented so many challenges where we would normally have weeks and weeks and weeks to be able to connect together in person and rehearse this. It's just not possible. It's not safe to do. So we spent about a week on Zoom on rehearsal, myself, Elijah, and our associate choreographer, Derek McQueen Jr. We did research. We talked about, the piece and the story and the substance that we were working on, as well as creating some individual improvisational phrases. And then we did a bubble residency at Vineyard Arts Project in Martha's Vineyard, Massachusetts. So we were there for 2 weeks. We underwent a number of COVID tests before we left, and we had a period of quarantine before we went to Martha's Vineyard. And then we were essentially in this bubble together, myself, my partner, Derek and Elijah, as well as dancers that we had on Zoom. And we basically lived, breathed, ate, danced in this piece. So it was intense because these stories are so, I mean, they're just so real. And in order for us to really bring a sense of authenticity to that, there comes a sense of weight and responsibility that comes with really bringing that to life authentically. So we had a lot of conversations about how to sensitively develop this entire work. But at every juncture, Elijah has been just a rock star. I keep telling all of my friends and family, Elijah was meant to play this role. He was the first person I envisioned, but he truly brings that youthful vitality, fearless spirit to this character, as you'll see in the ballet when it's finished.
Well, I've already seen in the clips that I've watched that's the case. And describe the physical set, how you decided on the dimensions and the set and the particular stories, how you brought those in to this process.
Prior to the pandemic, it was my goal to actually go into juvenile detention centers and work with the youth in the centers to do art workshops. I teach for a number of different institutions, as well as my own organization, where I go into public and charter schools, and I talk to students about just my journey as a young Black man coming to art and seeing art for the first time, and seeing how artistic expression has just helped me through so many different challenges in my life. And I wanted to be able to offer that to them, to give them the opportunity to find an artistic medium. It doesn't have to be dance, but we were going to dance, and I was going to help coach them through art and writing, but giving them just tools that they can utilize to be able to express themselves, as well as chart their own journey. In terms of the physical space, it was always my intention to always film in a detention facility. And I was in conversation with a number of people at the state and the local level that were really supportive and wanting to make that happen. But the pandemic has made that nearly impossible. So what we did instead was we graciously found a theater, the 14th Street Y, just so happened to be doing rentals during this time. And we were able to rent the space for 2 days. And my incredible cinematographer, Colton Williams, we put our brains together and said, okay, well, how can we make a detention center bedroom as if it were in this space? And so we created this structure that is 8 feet by 12 feet deep, which is bigger than most bedrooms in a detention center, but we wanted to make sure that we were able to give Elijah just a little bit more space to be able to room, but I know, or to move around. But I know that even just that amount of space, rehearsing that in the dance studio Martha's Vineyard, we taped it out, and often he would dance outside of it and I'd be like, wait, but you can't go that far. So even understanding the limitations within that was a playful and interesting challenge. And then in terms of the stories that I decided to choose, or how we brought the story together, was through a series of interviews and personal research that I had done, really chatting with either previously incarcerated young men, or through just reading memoirs and books and articles and things of that nature. And we have other developments that are happening as well, and partnering with a number of organizations in the city to be able to conduct those engagement opportunities virtually, as well as those interviews for future iterations of Wild.
Well, I love the way that you always build the advocacy and the education around your work from the ground up, from those communities. And we have a number of people with us for this event who we have CUNY Law alum who've been steeped in social justice, particularly on juvenile justice. And as I mentioned, we have our formerly incarcerated Law Students Association and others. So we're looking forward to bringing in both Professor Hayat, but also hearing from others in the room for a bigger discussion. Before we do that, though, could we see another sneak preview? And perhaps
Yes.
you can tell us a bit about it, either before or after.
Sure, absolutely. This is actually one of my favorite numbers. It's called Waves, and it's also a number written by Morgan, coincidentally, for this evening. But Waves, you know, connecting back to Where the Wild Things Are, and that being one of my favorite children's books. One of the big takeaways from that book was this young boy, Max, even though he was sent to his bedroom without supper, he imagined this world bigger than himself, where he reigned superior, where he was loved and valued and supported. And so that's what this particular number is an ode to. In Where the Wild Things Are, Max gets in a boat and he sails away to the island where the wild things are. And so we wanted to find a creative way to show this young boy's imagination and see the hopes and the goals and the dreams that he has for his life, for his family. And we found a creative way to do that. So this young boy, he has a journal, and throughout his journey in this entire ballet, he writes down various notes about his day and his process. In particular, this day is his 14th birthday. And so he's spending this 14th birthday by himself, slightly depressed by given of the circumstances that he's enduring, but also hopeful of what could come.
Against the page in all these ways, I said I'm fine, I'm reaching out for guidance. I pushed it past the point of least resistance. If I look in every face, I find some meaning. If I look, I'll find the way in California.
So throughout the ballet, we go back and forth between this overly romanticized or overly dramatic cartoon, almost like jail cell that was illustrated. And then we lose the walls and we go into this more of a light box where we were able to really kind of see a little bit more of what looks like a young man in a cage. And through these two different variations, we get to see a little bit more of Elijah's personality come to life. We see it mainly very stifled when the cinder blocks are on the screen, but once the screen goes away, we see a little bit more of his anger, love, his frustration, his rage, his disappointment. We get to see all of that gamut of those emotions. So it's the ability of him to think and visualize beyond his current circumstances is what those walls kind of represent and when they come in and out.
So phenomenal. And I want to bring Elijah right back to talk about what.
Hello.
Hello. I hope that you're seeing the chat, both of you, that I mean, all of the comments that are coming in about how phenomenal this is. And tell us about what we just saw from your perspective doing it.
Waves for me was it, it's a very it was really emotional but yet innocent, because he wants so many things. He wants to be able to get out, he wants to be able to just be a kid again, he wants to just be free, be happy, but knowing that he's stuck in these circumstances, these walls are stopping him. Like, that for me is so emotional, to know that like a 14-year-old kid can't get out of what he's stuck in just because of this color of his skin, just because of how the world just works. He's perpetually stuck. So that for me was finding the innocence, but yet making it known that like just because I'm a kid doesn't mean I can't be more and do more, you know? Because there are so many there are so many young black and brown bodies incarcerated right now, and they're all just waiting to get out, waiting to be more, waiting to do better, to help society along, knowing that they can. That's why waves for me is just that one piece. Hard to explain, but so much in it.
And when you started rowing, where were you going in that journey?
For me, I was going to Bora Bora, um, you know, trying to get out, feel the sun, you know, because there was only in the projections, there's only a small sliver of window. That small sliver of light is my hope, my dream, my aspirations, right there, so close, yet can't touch them because I'm stuck here, you know. So that moment when I was rowing, it even right now as I watch the film, I got goosebumps because like that I really was trying to get out of that space, like, and knowing that I had the ability to, but nobody else does who are in that same position. Ooh, it's heavy. It's hard knowing that after I did the piece, I was able to just go home and do what I do while others are still stuck in that position. So rowing, getting out. Yeah, it's very significant.
And that for me is something that I think I struggle with so much, is, you know, Camille, you've been there when I first started A Mother's Right. So you got to see what that whole process was like. But for those that are maybe less familiar with my work or with A Mother's Right, it's a story about a mother who lost her child to police brutality. It's a fictional story inspired by a ton of stories and interviews that I had watched and read. And you know, just even working on that work, while we were creating that work, bodies were still being killed. You know, people were still being killed, while we were creating it. And to create something like this, and to then go home and take that with you, and you know, it's a very heavy experience. But I think that it's so necessary to understand and recognize that these are real lives. We can't just put this on and take this off. When I was, you know, touring the country in Wicked, there was never a woman on tour with me that was of color that played Elphaba, and I would see the process of her, you know, becoming green and then being able to wash her skin and go home and just do whatever she wants to do. But with us, it's that responsibility and the authenticity that I think we carry with us so much, because we want to make sure that we're really, you know, for me, I'm making these works for my community. A lot of people make dance works or artistic works for art fanatics and art enthusiasts, but for me, it's all about giving Black and Brown people an opportunity to see their stories elevated and supported and told their way, in an authentic and a very creative fashion. So authenticity, and definitely recognizing that weight that we carry, and the privilege of being able, um, to go home and to do something that we want to do and to work on this is truly a privilege, and never taken for granted.
Well, that completely comes through in the work that you produce and the partnerships that you create and the talent that you have, and also your mission to collaborate with others, so that everyone can live with dignity, and that we can move to reform. On that note, what do you think might be an opportunity during this period of COVID to get more attention to the number of young people who are incarcerated, without the access to the education they need? And are there ways that you feel that this dance film now might have an even greater opening than it would have at another time, especially since Black Lives Matter? There is so much, a global movement that is happening, that you can certainly, that you are a part of, but that you can also leverage and tap into.
Yes, I mean, that's such a complex question. There's so many communities of people that I really want to see this work because I believe that through seeing it, we can start to have really dynamic conversations about specifically isolation and the trauma within that and the trauma of separation and not being able to connect with one another in the ways in which we've wanted to. And I also think that this pandemic has also created, even just for myself, a greater sense of empathy, having gone through my own sense of isolation away from family and friends. I have my partner, but it's different not being able to go and see a show or being able to give someone a hug. And so there's a number of ideas that I have in terms of ways I'd love to move this needle forward. A lot of times I'm asked, what is my goal? And I always tell people that my goal is to get as many Black and Brown incarcerated, justice involved youth the opportunity to see this work. So I'm particularly interested in collaborating with as many organizations as I can around the country to be able to get this film to them and to be able to have these conversations, for them to be able to see their lives on stage in this fashion, and also for us to be able to find ways that we can support them. There's an incredible organization called The Youth Will Be All Right. And what they do is they supply young men and women around the country in detention centers and jails with composition notebooks so that they can document and tell their own stories. I think the power of the pen is so important, and it's so important for us to make sure that we're amplifying these deserving voices and that they have a voice in being able to help us shape our country moving forward.
The power of the pen is a perfect moment to bring in Professor Fareed Hayat and Pablo Rojo here at CUNY Law. Hello, welcome, Fareed.
Oh, hello. Thank you for having us.
And Pablo Rojo, Sorensen Center Fellow in the Defense Clinic and working with Fareed. Professor Hayat, congratulations. You've just published, you've been accepted to publish this spring 2 additional articles on the constitutional right to due process. And we'd love to, with all of the conversation we've been having now, to bring in the power of the pen and the law in your scholarship and hear more about the issues you've identified that need to be addressed.
Well, I certainly build on what Jeremy is talking about in terms of bringing or recentering the voices of inner city Black and Brown youth. Gang statutes are prosecuted across this country in 29 different states. And in every single state, it's only Black and Brown youth that are being prosecuted. In Mississippi, as an example, the police department did their own study of who are gang members. And they found that 50% of the gang members in the state of Mississippi were white. Now, when you look at who's being prosecuted under gang statutes in Mississippi, 99% of the people being prosecuted are Black and Latino. So we have a thing where we've decided that we're going to criminalize, quote unquote, gang behavior. And then supplementally, we're going to only criminalize it when you're Black or Brown. And it becomes extremely problematic because of the very clear violations of the Constitution that occur. Gang statutes and gang prosecutions are structured in a way to make non-criminal behavior criminal, to allow relationships and activities of third parties to become evidence against you, to allow so-called experts, meaning police officers who arrest people who they claim are gang members, to testify what's in your mind and what you're thinking and why you did what you may have done, whether right or wrong. Gang statutes allow you to be prosecuted for an action that I've already been prosecuted for, no matter if you've been found guilty or not guilty, but again, prosecuted this time for that same crime and furtherance of the gang in violation of both the Constitution and double jeopardy clause in particular. So, that's the area in which I write, looking at evidence limitations, expert limitations, and then double jeopardy. The article that I'm working on now that hasn't been published, hasn't even been written yet, though, is the next step, and that's what we talk about here at CUNY, is abolition. Because though the first four articles are a pragmatic approach at how we can empower criminal defense attorneys, how we can give callings to prosecutors to do the right thing, how we can demand legislatures do the right thing. The next step really is that we must get rid of these types of prosecution and abolish them. And in abolishing, imagine something new. Imagine a way to provide for our community that is not punitive, that does not include the carceral state, that includes opportunity. And, that's largely where I write.
Pablo, I want to bring you in too, because you've been imagining a new vision, and now you are about to graduate from law school, and congratulations, have gotten a job as a public defender in this world. What world are you imagining? What are you working toward?
So I share much of Professor Hayat's views of abolition. I know a lot of my colleagues here were out this past summer. Just to see this mass movement of people this past summer was so inspiring, and to see all the young people. I'm up here in Harlem, which is such a historic place to be, especially right now with these movements happening. So it was really powerful to see that, and it just helped me understand what I want to work towards, and that is abolition is the goal, 100%. We may not all agree on that right now, but I'm hoping to create a world where, as Fareed said, we can imagine something different. And so, I'll be working with juveniles in Portland, Oregon this year as their public defender. So, I myself, as I'm sure many other people in the chat, had my experience with the criminal justice system first at 13 years old. My brother spent plenty of time in jail as a juvenile as well. So definitely felt that family separation. So I'm just working through a world without that. And I think that these pieces that I just saw from Jeremy and Elijah were just so moving, and that expression of of just like what it feels like to be a child, and to not be able to move out of that, and to have people just say like, you're worth nothing, it was just, that was so moving and powerful. So yeah, definitely the goals of abolition.
If I can, I would like to follow up with Pablo's statement about being a child. And I'm working on a book right now, and one of the sections in the book deals with the story about me. I'm surrounded with 3 of my friends in elementary school, and I'm lying to the crowd about doing a drive-by the night before. And I'm telling them, yeah, I did this drive-by. I was hanging out the window. I was dumping. And then one of my other friends come up and say, he lying. I saw him last night. He didn't do anything. And the point that I'm going to try to capture in the book is really like this idea that as an 8-year-old in elementary school in 2nd grade, that I like had this fantasy of wanting to commit drive-bys, and how like for me at the time, there was nothing wrong with this fantasy. And in fact, like it was something that I thought would actually, empowered me, made me somebody, made me feel good. And it was as a child that I developed these kind of qualities. And now, of course, my research has opened up the world. And now I get that, hey, gangs existed before criminality in gangs existed. And that criminality only was brought to gangs really in rejection of the Black Panther Party and the interjection of crack cocaine. Gangs for the first time developed the ability or the willingness or the need to be criminal. Because before we brought crack cocaine to gangs, some gang members committed crimes, but gangs were not gang criminal organizations. And, I grew up in a space in which that transition happened. So I'm talking about me at 8 years old. That's literally 1985. So in the midst of, the Free Ray Ricky Ross expansion of crack cocaine within my community. So this youth, this innocence, and in the law, we talk about the presumption of innocence, and this concept that as an 8-year-old, this innocence that I was supposed to have was taken away right at that point. And no one standing in a jury booth or a judge sitting up on a bench was going to look down me at that 8-year-old and somehow have any kind of sympathy or understanding for me. There would be no innocence seen in my 8-year-old body if I, in fact, was engaged in that drive-by the night before. And I think that's really what Jeremy captures, and in terms of what he's talking about in the dance and what we see through Elijah's expression in this movement.
Thank you, Fareed. I want to bring in also Phil Miller, who is part of PhilSA here at CUNY Law and has a question and a comment.
Sure, thanks, Camille. Thanks everyone on the panel, especially to all of you actually, but Jeremy for being visionary and Elijah for being such a fantastic performer, and your words were just so eloquently placed when you were speaking. It was really, really moving. So I do have I'm just introducing myself. So I'm a 1L at CUNY Law. I'm also a member of PhilSA, and I have a question for Jeremy, but I would like to preface it with a brief comment. So basically, I am someone who's actually benefited from having access to the arts in prison. For 11 of my 17 years of incarceration, I was involved in theater programs. And so that involved artwork, involved singing, dancing, stage plays, like you name it, I've run the gamut of it. And I just think it's really great that, Jeremy, that you are contributing your time and passion to people who really will appreciate it way more than you'll probably ever know. And I'm looking forward to seeing what other great works you're going to continue to do. And because as I'm sure everyone knows, and definitely you, there are probably many tangible and intangible benefits to participating in the arts in a carceral setting. And some of them are that they instill confidence in the participants, they inspire hope for a better future, and they actually remind the incarcerated person of their own humanity in a place that really tries to erase it. So it's not just an arts program, it's like really, it's a life-changing kind of program when it's happening in that kind of setting. And so knowing that your art and dance classes and everything are having this kind of effect on the people who are participating, is there any way for them to follow up with you after their release so that they might continue to get training or additional guidance from you to try to keep them on that forward moving path?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you so much for your very kind words and for sharing a bit of your story with us. That's truly incredible and just moving to hear your own personal ways in which art has helped you. That's always been my goal, is to create a community where people can come and gather resources. You know, I feel like the wealth of knowledge and the things that I've been given, it's only meant to be given back. I often consider myself an altruist, which was a paper that I wrote in college, but it's, you know, for me, it's all about selflessly giving back. We don't have necessarily a system in place right now where people can come to us and be able to have more resources, but I always, you know, make my email available to whoever, and I really do try to connect with as many people as I possibly can, because I myself see just how far mentorship has helped me in my life and in my career, and has helped me get to where I am. You know, Camille has been very much a mentor to me. And so I definitely want to make sure that I can be able to offer that and to continue this journey with those that would be interested.
And what an honor it has been, Jeremy, to have your friendship. There have been so many compelling stories told in this short amount of time, and I would love to be able to bring in others. And I know we have one other question here, a lot of just pouring out with thanks to all of you for what you've shared today. Let's see in the chat room here.
Thank you. Let me echo everyone who said what an absolute joy and impressive feat it is. I almost got through those clips without crying, but you got me at the end. So thank you. So my pedigree is I'm a law student here at CUNY, and before that I got a degree in classical music. And one issue that I've dealt with in both, especially in the law, one thing that I keep thinking about is this question of the law is based on the words of old white supremacists. and that's sort of the foundation that we're working on. And the question is, can you do social justice work building on that foundation, or is it necessary to sort of tear it all down and start again? And I had a similar problem in classical music. Is it possible to do something original building on this old white Eurocentric tradition, or do you have to tear it down and start with something new? And I was wondering if you could speak to that in the world of dance, and especially this socially conscious choreography.
Absolutely. Thank you for that question. That's been, my primary impetus in all of this, going to the theater as a young kid and seeing stories like Nutcracker, Swan Lake, Giselle, all stories that are based in European tradition, history, fables, storytelling. I do think it is a sense of abolition of ballet as we know it. That has definitely been my goal and my mission with creating the Black Iris Project. And I think I've ruffled a lot of feathers from people in my community because of the ways I am not only talking about all of these ivory pillars and things that we have in place, but also working to dismantle it by trying something completely different. So our institution or our organization is really built with that idea of diversity and inclusion and equity being at the forefront of our mission. It's not an initiative that we've created all of a sudden because it's popular or performative. So I do think it really means dismantling the entire art system and saying, how do we make more authentic, creative, diverse, and equitable art?
Thank you, David. We have a couple of other questions here. We have a question from Jonathan.
I can go ahead and share Jonathan's question. Could the US government have brought down the 5 families without RICO, or did the US government have more in mind with the passage of that law? And I'm assuming, I think that question is for you, Professor Hayat.
Well, through my research, I don't believe that RICO was really about the 5 families. RICO was much like the Patriot Act and was more about like taking away constitutional promises that we have and that we had. I teach a class in criminal procedure too about the Bail Reform Act. And for the first time in American history, they were allowed to hold you in jail because you may go commit a crime if we release you. And this was one of these mafia families that were being prosecuted. And what you learn if you read the dissent, there's a couple of interesting things that go on in the case. If you learn when you read, they had this guy, he's the head of a mafia family, he's allegedly killed all these people and sold drugs. And they said, we don't want to let him out because he'll go kill more people. Well, come to find out, by the time his case got to the Supreme Court, he had already been convicted of a murder and sentenced to life in prison. So as a result, we didn't have to hear his case anymore because he was already serving a life sentence. So he could get bail on his pending case and still not get out of jail. And the court continued with this case because the court wanted to change the law and say, no, we are going to be able to hold you pre-trial if you're dangerous. They took the most dangerous man in the world they could find to change our presumption of innocent, right? That we cannot be held in jail because we're presumed innocent. And Justice Marshall addressed that in the dissent. And he says, that this opinion will go out without authority and come back with no respect. The last point I'll make about that is that Justice Rehnquist, in his majority opinion, specifically says that Congress has asked us to do something about the Bail Reform Act. And he cites to this request of Congress. Well, if you read the case and you click on that site, and it's about 80 pages, there's committee notes. But if you read maybe 20 pages in, and I shared this with my class that we're teaching now, Black Lives Matter, using the laws of sword and shield. In the committee notes, you have the congressperson saying, well, the chief judge has asked us to make this law. So you have, in the majority opinion, him saying Congress has asked you to do it. And then within the documents, the Congress people acknowledging that, no, he's asked us to do it. So it just really reiterates that this is all a part of a very clear, deliberate, and well-executed plan to take away constitutional rights. So no, I don't believe that RICO was necessary in order to take down those families. I believe that we got more than enough laws and good police work, whatever that may be, will actually produce quality evidence to prosecute anyone who's committing crimes. The problem is we don't want to follow the rules. And because we're largely only prosecuting now Black and Latino people with these kind of charges, Professor Babe Howell wrote extensively about the Bronx 120 and the use of RICO and bringing down individuals who literally were already brought down, meaning poor, without resources, and already serving jail sentences.
Yeah, and if I could just piggyback off of Fareed's point about in the first article that was written with KJ as the example, you look up his case, and right after his gang statute and murder case that gave him a life sentence, there's a federal case against him bringing similar charges. So absolutely, there's more than enough laws out there to prosecute anybody you want to prosecute. And then I just want to make a point about this idea of creating things like RICO or the Patriot Act. I think we're seeing it again right now since the Capitol riot. And while it may feel a little, I don't want to say it, well, it sometimes it
justified.
It feels a little good, right, to see like white supremacists getting charged with these same sort of statutes. Hopefully, well, some of them getting off light. But anyways, the point is, we keep seeing this concept of domestic terrorism going around in the news right now, and I'm worried we're going to see another type of RICO or Patriot Act come soon, based off of this guys that they're going to be trying to prosecute the white supremacists. But in reality, 5 years from now, what's really going to happen with these new domestic terrorism laws and priorities by the U.S. attorneys' offices is we're going to see, I think, more of what we've seen with RICO and state gang statutes, where they go after, either leftist organizations or, just Black and brown organizations in general, whether they be political or whether they be, criminal gangs at all. So just wanted to throw that point out there, that we need to still be careful and vigilant about when Congress tries to take away constitutional rights under the guise of protecting us.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you both. I think some of us are wondering if we can audit that class, Black Lives Matter, using law as a sword and a shield. We have another question from Santana Anise. And I know we're going to have to wrap up soon, but I don't think anyone who wants to go quite yet. Thank you, Santana.
Sure. Hi there. My name is Santana Innes. I come to this conversation from a little bit of a different perspective. I'm VP of Digital Programs at an organization called the International Center for Missing and Exploited Children. And a lot of the reasons that cause children to go missing are very similar to the reasons that might cause youth to end up in the youth to prison pipeline. Lack of access to resources, community support, poverty, discrimination against Black and brown bodies, all of these things. And so the story of Max that Elijah so eloquently brings to life with his movements is something that's particularly, of interest to me and our organization, so that we can come at the causes of children going missing, because, frankly, there are disparities in how the law and legal apparatus go about relocating missing children when they are white missing children versus when they are children of color. So I would love to ask a question primarily for Jeremy and Elijah, but I would also like to hear the perspective of Pablo and Professor Hayat as well. And that question is this: storytelling is a huge component of Wild. And it really feels like the storytelling in Wild serves to humanize the character Max, to humanize his struggles, his wants to break free, juxtaposed against, being imprisoned. So what role in your creative process did storytelling play in humanizing the experiences of Black and brown youth in incarceration? And do you think that humanizing Black and brown incarcerated youth is even a constructive conversation when we talk about improving justice and access to justice and equity? Do we need to even humanize Black and brown people to show the worth of justice? Or does that conversation set us back. Thank you.
Wow, thank you so much for that question, Santana. Storytelling has always been so deeply rooted in who I am. I believe that we all have a unique story, and all of our stories are so different than everyone else's. And it's always been my goal and my mission to not only honor my own story, but to elevate those of other people's stories, because I do believe that it's our stories, our unique things that make us so different and special, that helps us move forward and find community, being able to share those stories in various fashions, as well as specifically being able to tell these stories and reading so many different stories through a number of Richard Ross's books of the research that he had done were so moving because they were just so honest. And I think that in order for us to truly be able to talk about restorative justice and to talk about abolishing all of these pillars and stylos that exist, we really do need to hear the stories, and we do need to humanize the person or the individuals that are impacted most by this and give them truly a seat at the table, give their voices an opportunity to be heard, and also ask them for support as to what they think we can do better. One of the things for me in this journey of creating this 4-part ballet is that I'm really allowing the youth and the stories and the interviews and the research that I do to lead me. I don't want to come to my own conclusions of how this story ends. So part 4 right now, which is slated to come out in September on National Dance Day, I have no idea what that looks like, because I'm really allowing the conversations and the stories that are being shared with me so generously to lead me. And with that being said, as mentioned before, I'm eagerly trying to connect with even more people that are willing to share their stories with me so that I can share those stories and amplify multiples of voices to help us truly be the change that we wish to see and create a more equitable and just world.
Yes, and also to piggyback off of that, being in the position of actually being the character incarcerated in those walls, even though, yes, I haven't been in that position, all of those stories helped me get into that mindset. Just like method acting, just like actors in this realm and this day, they have to do research, and research includes getting to know the people who are behind these bars, getting to know the people who had to endure all this pain just because of their skin color, and knowing that they didn't get a choice. It was just what was put on them. So but knowing that they're human before their mistakes or anything was done is what makes everybody human. And that's, like, for me, you can't be a dancer without being human first. You can't be anything without being human first. So definitely knowing who they are, their stories, helped get the process deeper, more involved, and really honor their struggles and what they've went through. So yeah, definitely.
I would add to that. Professor Cynthia Lee down at George Washington Law School, she has an amazing article where she says that we have to make race salient when we're having trials. And her argument essentially is that, we are largely good people and that we don't desire to be racist. And that because white supremacy is so vast that, we often kind of fall into place and do the work of white supremacy without even have to acknowledge it personally. So she says that if we center race, if we bring that back to the fore and not say, hey, you did this because that person's Black, but you simply bring up the fact that this is a white male, this is a Black defendant, and make you center that conversation of, am I going to allow my prejudices to decide this matter? She looked at multiple studies that said that if you don't center that, they find that Black defendant more guilty more often by simply not bringing up race. But if you say, no, we have some ideologies and we need to acknowledge them, then we oftentimes will do the right thing. I'll say on the final note that I've had many trials, one in particular where my client was 6'4", 240 pounds, a lot of muscle. And the prosecutor's argument was, he was the muscle. He was the muscle. And when I came up on my closing, I said, ladies and gentlemen, his name is Jason White, and he's a human being. She wants you to see him as a pack of meat. just some muscle with no humanity, he's a human being, Madam State. And that was a not guilty. But I think that that moment right there, because I was offended, I understood what she was doing. She understood what she was doing. She was calling on the racists to see him as a dangerous big black man because she didn't have no evidence that he committed the crime. So as a result, oftentimes we have to, like, as suggested, humanize our defendants, humanize ourselves in order to be able to combat white supremacy that's alive and well.
Yeah, and then just going off of what Professor Hayat said, I think storytelling always has its place when you're doing this work, especially in criminal defense or prisoners' rights. Just working with the Defenders Clinic here at CUNY and getting the chance to meet my client Jacob Rouse, who's incarcerated in Elmira, New York right now. I was on the phone with him this morning. He's such a great individual, and just the entire year working with him was just getting his story and just putting his story onto the paper. Like, yes, there's law involved and there's things that you want to show the governor, and you use all that, but it was more than anything, I really loved that experience because I just felt like I get to humanize this person to the governor. Ultimately, and nothing's come of it yet, but there's a documentary out. He's been in several documentaries, and he loves to share his story. And from that, I learned about other incarcerated individuals who he works with who also love to share their stories. And it's so much of an inspiration to so many younger people who hear it, especially younger people who are incarcerated. It gives them hope just to see, how, I guess, just making the best out of these situations, as horrible as they may be. So I just think that storytelling is always very important because, like everyone said, we're all human. And it's very important to humanize people who are in the criminal justice system because they're not seen as human. And it's just plain and simple as that. It's horrible.
Thank you. I just want to, Jeremy, turn to you last and ask you how we can be helpful with WILD as you take this to the next step.
Thank you. It's creating work during a pandemic has been a significant challenge. And so we always are in need of support in order to be able to continue doing this work. Whether it be support financially or even support in connecting us with people that can help us share our message and our mission. We are still a small organization, so I truly appreciate all of our seed planters and the people that really invest deeply into us and help us to grow. To get involved with the Black Iris Project, you can visit our website, blackirisproject.org. And WILD will be available, or WILD Act 2 or Act 1, excuse me, will be available for streaming on our website at blackirisproject.org/wild beginning March 15th through April 4th only. And on our website, there's an email address where you can feel free to reach out to me with any comments, questions, concerns. If you have any leads on organizations or people that you think we should get in contact with or connect with that might be able to help us further and grow, I would appreciate any and all support, as well as there's also a support link where if you're able to, you're welcome to make a tax-deductible donation to help us to continue to create works like this in the future.
Thank you all. Thank you for the questions. What a great panel. This was wonderful. Jeremy, congratulations. Elijah, congratulations. And good night.